China as a global health leader. What are the concerns? This all sounds too good to be true. Here is China, a nation with experience in economic development reform, leading the world with an economic drive, strengthened health systems, and deep pockets. So, are they going to save the day? Or are they, in fact, a country promoting its own agenda and development, a disinterested donor? For China, health aid is embedded in the dynamic shifting of foreign and economic policies. It's powerful economic motives that drive much of China's global engagement to the point where dividing line between trade and aid become blurred and difficult to distinguish. China's diplomacy is also questionable. It's a country with a very different leadership style from the Western world. And one concern is that the Belt and Road project may be overstepping boundaries, asking countries with questionable, tense relationships to work together. Just going to play a video.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce Kadira Pethiagoda to you now, visiting fellow in Asia and Middle East relations at Brookings Doha. He's come in to talk to us about all this today. Thank you for coming in. In Adrian's report, he said China is very good at these sorts of events. And I thought that's quite a point, isn't it? It knows how to pull off the big events and almost, I mean, we say the Silk Road, it's like a branding exercise, isn't it? Just China stamping its mark on this, isn't it?
Exactly. I think that, I mean, for Beijing, this is really symbolic of its coming to great power status, of its ascendance. And in a sense, it almost rivals the Beijing Olympics in 2008, in the sense that China sees both policymakers and the public see their civilization as a great one. It was humiliated perhaps during the colonial era, and now this is more like a course correction, where they're actually returning to that top spot in global power.
It strikes me that everyone would think this was a good idea because of the obvious benefits, taking you from China all the way to Europe and beyond to Africa. But the logistics of it, countries which don't necessarily get on with each other, let's think about India, Pakistan, disputed Kashmir, all the sort, putting it into practice, this is going to be huge, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's already been difficult. So certain projects have already been halted. You know, there's been sort of changes in demand in China in terms of its economic needs that have led to some projects not going ahead as quickly. There's been, you know, for example, in Sri Lanka, there's been projects which have been started under certain governments, and then when the governments change, that's influenced it. So China's, I think, faced a few bumps along the way, as you say, but I think that overall it sees this really as a project as part of its great power ascendance. And I think that what's important to it is that it creates those strategic relationships with countries along its trade routes. So, because one of China's greatest fears is actually being encircled by US allies, and it sees a threat to its trade routes. So if you look at the map, if you look at the countries that are involved in this, they're countries that go all the way along its trade routes from East Asia all the way to the Middle East.
Is it potentially messier now as well when you throw in the North Korea situation, when the lines are being drawn, South Korea and the US, China and all this? I mean, it's, again, I don't want to rain on the whole parade because it's clearly something which could work, but just trying to put this together in the current climate.
Yeah, definitely. And I think China is trying to actually differentiate itself from the US in that sense, where it's trying to project an image of, you know, the US is having confrontations with North Korea, it's drawing lines, it's got allies, it's got enemies, whereas China is trying to actually bring the Eurasian landmass together. And in a subtle way, it's actually trying to exclude the US in that sense, where, you know, if you look even at the symbolism of the Silk Route, I mean, this harks back to an era when China was a great civilization, when European powers weren't as powerful and the US didn't even exist. So the symbolism is very powerful here, and China sees itself, if you look at Chinese culture and the Confucian ideals of leadership, it sees itself as sort of a benevolent leader. And the peaceful rise of China and all that kind of rhetoric feeds into that as well.
Fascinating stuff. Kadira, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you coming in. Thank you. This is what the Counting the Cost team
So, in summary, although China's leadership style is not familiar, it is not necessarily a negative concern. As Einstein himself suggests, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. China's multilateral strategy and approach is full of participation, with records showing that China complies with rules governing multilateral institutions in all affairs, including health, trade, migration, environment, and other aspects of global governance. Overall, China is approaching sustainable health outcomes through a different approach. Instead of focusing on placing all efforts into direct health outcome initiatives, their approach is more sustainable by focusing on solutions such as infrastructure that promotes access and universal health coverage. Despite all these concerns, all of these initiatives are generating positive global health outcomes. The fact is, China is leading by example and stepping up to the plate when no one else will. Thank you.